On the first day of my return, an imperial decree betrothed me to Jacob Rivers. The second day brought an invitation from Mrs. Thompson for her birthday banquet. By the third day, I was under their scrutiny.
Really, I don't know what kind of luck Lily Jiang has to catch the eye of young General Rivers and request an imperial marriage decree.
Her words dripped with jealousy, yet everyone nodded in agreement. I was merely an illegitimate daughter of a minor official, while Jacob Rivers was a general from the prestigious Northern Marquis family.
Perhaps it's because I visited the Southern Temple a few days ago to pray for a good match, and thus received some good fortune.
Upon hearing this, everyone asked me what this meant, except for Sophia Reed, the daughter of the Minister of Justice.
What a joke. General Rivers is just infatuated with your looks. If he marries you, he'll surely kick you out within 3 days.
Her words were harsh, but no one dared to refute her. Not only because she was the daughter of the Minister of Justice, but also because she was a close friend of Princess Grace.
Lily Jiang, I advise you to keep a low profile. Just because you got an engagement doesn't mean you should act like a phoenix rising to the top, or you'll end up like your dear sister.
The crowd fell silent immediately. My sister, or rather I, had met a tragic end. 2 years ago, I was titled Princess Rongla and sent to marry into the Kingdom of Siena.
In the first year there, I had some hope, hoping to start anew in a place where no one knew me. But somehow, the news of my disgrace spread, and my husband, already displeased with the scar on my face, locked me in a woodshed in a fit of rage, forbidding anyone to give me food or drink.
The servants took this opportunity to bully and humiliate me. In my final moments, an old maid finally revealed the truth. It was Princess Grace of Zhou Kingdom who had orchestrated it all.
Grace! Always Grace! I couldn't understand why she wanted to ruin my appearance, my honor, and my marriage when I had done nothing to her.
When I opened my eyes again, I had become my illegitimate sister, Emily Jiang, an inconspicuous daughter of a noble family. 3 days ago, an unexpected imperial decree tied me to Jacob Rivers, leading to my invitation to this banquet.
Forget her, she's just jealous. Tell us more about that Southern Temple.
The atmosphere quickly became lively again. As noon approached, the banquet began.
Princess Grace has arrived.
I silently lifted my gaze. Dressed in luxurious attire, with an arrogant expression, she was still the same, unchanged.
Ha, you do remember well.
I felt impatient, but my face remained soft and timid as I nodded.
My sister was exceptionally beautiful, I dare not compare.
Ha, no matter how beautiful, she's still dead.
She sneered, utterly unrestrained.
You two sisters are equally annoying.
2 years ago, my fiancé, Michael King, also said the same. He sent me to another man's bed, saying I was an eyesore to Grace. Just because I was an eyesore, they could ruin my honor. Just because I was an eyesore, they could destroy my appearance. If such absurd actions were the privileges of a princess, then I would make sure she paid for everything.
You go pick 99 different flowers for me. If you can't, don't bother eating.
I lowered my gaze to hide my emotions, pretending not to see the sympathetic looks from others, and walked alone to the garden. Thompson's garden was full of blooming flowers, but finding 99 different ones was still challenging. I searched for a long time and found only half. Suddenly, I heard footsteps and saw an unexpected person. He seemed to notice me too and walked in my direction.
Miss Jiang.
General Rivers.
Miss Jiang, it was presumptuous of me to request the imperial decree, but your sister asked me to look after you before she passed. I hope you can forgive me.
I was surprised and suddenly remembered the day I left Zhou Kingdom. At that time, my face had been disfigured, and I often wore a veil to cover it. Jacob Rivers' father was the Marquis of the North. 2 years ago, he led his troops to a defeat and died on the battlefield. Jacob Rivers, in his youthful arrogance, volunteered to guard the border, vowing not to return to the capital until he reclaimed the lost land. His Majesty agreed, so he escorted me out of the border for the marriage alliance. I wasn't particularly familiar with Jacob Rivers, and whenever we looked at each other, I was always the first to lower my head.
If you return to the capital victorious, please take care of my half-sister.
This is the first thing you've said to me on this journey.
I didn't understand what he meant and looked at him in confusion.
I mean, don't worry, I will do it. And also, the veil doesn't diminish your beauty, but it does obscure your vision. I hope your journey goes smoothly and you have no worries.
He was the first person to wish me well on this journey. In that moment, it felt like raindrops falling on a lotus pond, creating ripples.
Don't worry, I will.
As I walked out of Thompson's Gate, I saw Jacob Rivers again. He was standing at the entrance, seemingly waiting for someone. When he saw me, he walked over.
You shouldn't have acted so impulsively today.
Thank you, General Rivers, for asking His Royal Highness the Crown Prince to come today, but what I did today was not impulsive.
It's just a small matter. Why not let her have her way? She is a princess, and I may not be able to protect you.
A small matter? Then what is a big matter? If today's issue is settled, Lucy will be driven out of the Jiang residence. Do you know what will happen to her then? Can you take responsibility for that? General Rivers, you are of noble status and don't care about the lives of these people, but I can't. I don't need General Rivers to protect me. My sister's words were just a joke. General Rivers can dissolve the engagement. After all, this marriage is not what you wanted.
I didn't mean that.
But I couldn't be bothered to look at him anymore and pushed past him to get into the carriage.
Miss, you don't have to argue with the general because of me. Lucy, this has nothing to do with you.
I was just tired of always giving in. Back then, I endured again and again out of fear of Grace's retaliation. I thought that by doing so, she would leave me alone, but all I got in return was more and more humiliation. I was tired of victims having to remain silent for life, tired of the powerful trampling on others at will. This world shouldn't be like this. After staying quietly in the residence for a few days, the capital welcomed a grand event. The Emperor and Empress, along with the ministers and their families, were going to the royal temple, Nanyuan Temple, to pray for the people. That year was the same. I followed my parents to Nanyuan Temple with joy, not only to pray for the people but also to wish for a smooth marriage with Michael King. When he sent that letter, I hesitated, but since our engagement was already set, I went to meet him in his garden. I didn't expect that I wouldn't see him but would be struck from behind. When I woke up, I faced the astonished and disdainful gazes of the crowd, a strange pain on my face, and a stranger beside me. Everything I had worked so hard for, my reputation, my appearance, was all ruined. Afterward, I angrily questioned him, but he only said that I had caught Grace's eye. Caught her eye, huh? Now I find the two of them quite an eyesore too. On March 16th, the whole city cheered, lining the streets to welcome the Emperor and Empress's procession to Nanyuan Temple. I sat in the carriage, quietly waiting for the show to begin. The carriage window was suddenly knocked on.
Lily Jiang, I misspoke last time. A country is made up of its people. What happened that day was indeed not a small matter for Lucy. I didn't mean to restrict you. Since we're engaged, I naturally won't abandon you. Besides, to prevent any misunderstanding, I want to explain the engagement. Your sister's request was true, but that day I learned that the youngest son of Censor Su wanted to forcefully marry you. He frequents brothels, drinks heavily, and gambles. He is not a good man. In my urgency, I asked His Majesty for the marriage decree. I didn't consider it well. If you have someone in your heart, I will give up this marriage. If not, I can shelter you from the storm.
I was stunned. So that was it. What he said about the unpredictability of life was referring to this. I came to my senses and hurriedly lifted the curtain to say something, but he had already left. At the South Edge Temple, unrelated people had already been cleared out. After a series of rituals, only the communal vegetarian meal for the officials remained. There was still some time before noon, so the temple arranged accommodations for the ladies of various families. The abbot led Empress Isabella and the other ladies to the meditation rooms to rest, but suddenly they saw one room with its door wide open and a strange smell emanating from it. The faces of several experienced ladies changed instantly, and Empress Isabella's expression turned extremely unpleasant.
Who is so shameless as to commit such indecency in a place of meditation?
Someone immediately went forward to check, and their face changed after seeing the scene.
Your Majesty, it is Princess Grace.
Empress Isabella's face turned pale, but she quickly regained her composure and was about to scold the person for speaking nonsense.
Oh. Isn't that the princess's glazed silk?
Glazed silk was a fabric tribute from foreign lands, exclusively for royal use. Sure enough, everyone started whispering.
Could it really be the princess?
I think that man's figure looks familiar too.
Silence. How dare you slander the princess? Get out of my sight.
Even after being dismissed by the empress, people continued to gossip. Though the empress called it slander, everyone knew it was indeed Princess Grace. As for the man, judging by his attire, he seemed to be Mr. Johnson from the Ministry of Revenue. Mr. Johnson was a married man. These ladies were all shrewd and knew the implications of this matter. Upon returning home, they immediately ordered their servants to keep silent. However, despite the orders, the news spread like wildfire throughout the capital in the following days. After leaving the crowd, I went alone to the back mountain to meet someone.
Take this money and leave quickly.
Thank you, Mississippi. Thank you, Mississippi.
Aurora thanked me repeatedly. I had met her at a banquet before. She was a maid of the princess. At that time, she stood behind Grace, intending to harm her, but I stopped her. She said her sister had been tormented to death by the princess, and she was willing to risk her life to avenge her sister. I told her that to confront a stronger enemy, she must strike decisively, so I asked her to wait. The South Edge Temple was the battlefield I had planned. I wanted Grace to fall into the abyss step by step, just as I had. A few days before going to the temple, Aurora gave me Grace's daily letters, allowing me to forge a letter that lured Michael King to the backyard. As for Grace, after her prayers, she had already gone to rest in the meditation room. A cup of drugged tea rendered her unconscious. Aurora distracted Grace's maid and then lit the prepared incense in the meditation room. Everything else followed naturally. I had been preparing for this show for a long time.
The princess has been disgraced, and you will surely be buried with her. Do not return.
Watching her leave, I breathed a sigh of relief. Next, there was only one step left to deal with Grace.
Why do you treat her this way?
My face turned cold as I looked up towards the source of the voice. It was Jacob Rivers, standing among the trees, his figure partially obscured by the branches and leaves.
What do you want?
Why did you frame the princess?
My mind raced. I couldn't let Jacob Rivers reveal this matter. Now that we were engaged, he might still be willing to listen to my explanation. I forced myself to shed a couple of tears, hiding the malice in my eyes, and put on an innocent look.
General Rivers, you don't know. 2 years ago, my sister was harmed by Princess Grace. I'm only seeking justice for her.
2 years ago. He frowned deeply.
Yes, 2 years ago, my sister was harmed by the princess, humiliated, and lost her honor. She recently appeared in my dreams, asking me to avenge her. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done such a thing. Once this matter is settled, I will not harm the princess again. Could you please keep this a secret?
He remained silent for a long time before speaking.
You don't need to be like this with me. You are not a gentle person by nature. We are engaged, and if you explain things to me properly, I am not so righteous that I would send you to the authorities.
I sighed inwardly. There was no need to drag him into my revenge. It was better to explain clearly.
General Rivers, what I told you is not a lie. 2 years ago, Grace framed me, causing me to lose my honor. The second prince requested a decree for me to marry into the kingdom of Siena, but Grace still wouldn't let me go. She spread the news of my dishonor throughout Siena, ordering people to mistreat me. I'm only repaying her in kind.
You? His eyes were full of disbelief.
Yes, after my death, I somehow became my half-sister. Now, do you have any other questions?
He seemed too shocked to say anything.
If not, I will take my leave. Please keep this a secret for me, General Rivers.
I didn't know if he would keep my secret. I had revealed everything, and now it was up to him to decide. After the incident with Princess Grace, I heard that Empress Isabella had discussed with the King family several times, seemingly wanting Michael King to divorce his wife and marry the princess. However, the wife's family was also formidable, and the discussions dragged on until early April when the envoys from the Kingdom of Siena arrived. The first thing the envoys requested was for His Majesty to marry off Princess Grace to solidify the alliance.
The person His Majesty married last year was not the real princess? Our kingdom merely wants to exchange for the true princess.
3 months ago, Jacob Rivers had defeated the Kingdom of Siena and reclaimed lost territory. As a defeated nation, Siena had no grounds to make such demands, yet His Majesty did not outright refuse, leaving room for negotiation. When I heard the envoy's condition, I felt a sense of relief. From the moment I returned, I had planned to use this matter. In my previous life, I had accidentally discovered a secret in the Kingdom of Siena, and now it was finally coming into play. Everyone in the capital knew about Grace's situation. Rather than marrying her off to a courtier and creating resentment, it was better to send her to Siena, out of sight and mind, while preserving the royal family's reputation. Sure enough, 3 days later, His Majesty agreed to the marriage alliance with Siena for Grace. It was exactly like what happened to me back then. As for the outcome, it should be the same. On the day she left, I made a point to see her off. I held an umbrella and knocked on Grace's carriage window.
It's you? What are you doing here?
Grace's eyes were vacant, lacking her usual arrogance.
I smiled. Naturally, I'm here to see the princess off. After all, I've been planning for this day for a long time.
You. It was you. You ruined me.
Grace was furious, reaching through the window to grab my face. I stepped back and caught her hand.
Princess, as a royal, it is your duty to marry for the kingdom. Besides, didn't you do the same to me back then?
You? Who are you? How do you know?
The darkness in my eyes deepened as I tightened my grip on her hand.
How could I not know, Grace? I am Ivy Jiang. I've come to settle the score.
Impossible! Impossible! She died long ago. You can't be her.
I took a deep breath and released her hand.
No matter. Now, as the princess heads to Siena, I wish you a safe journey. I've heard that Siena is quite open-minded. I wonder if they will accept a princess who has lost her purity. Please wait for my gift.
What gift? I be Jiang, my brother is the second prince. If you dare do anything to me, he will never let you go.
Rest assured, princess. Soon, when the second prince is in dire straits, he won't be able to protect you.
Grace's curses continued until the carriage disappeared from my sight. One matter was finally resolved. Next, it was the second prince's turn, but this required careful planning. I turned around, ready to leave, but unexpectedly saw Jacob Rivers again. He walked towards me with a solemn expression.
Ivy Jiang, I know about the past. I once wished you a smooth journey and a worry-free life, and I still do now.
The pond from that rainy day seemed to still be there, but now it had turned into a heavy downpour. A spark ignited on my cheeks, spreading until it became a wildfire. I covered my face, waiting for the burning sensation to subside. Finally, I looked up at him.
Jacob Rivers, can you do me a favor?
Sure.
Aren't you going to ask what it is?
Anything.
Well, it wasn't a big deal. I just needed him to introduce me to the crown prince. If I wanted to bring down the second prince, the crown prince was undoubtedly the best choice. The crown prince was born to the late empress, while the second prince and Princess Grace were born to Empress Isabella. The two of them were close in age and the main contenders for the throne. My strength alone was like an ant trying to shake a tree. I could only pledge my loyalty to the crown prince. Once he ascended the throne, the second prince would surely meet a bad end. Meeting the crown prince was a decisive moment.
Your Royal Highness the Crown Prince, the crossbow design I have can make your private army invincible. My new water wheel can greatly benefit the people. I have many other designs that can help His Majesty win hearts abroad and strengthen the military at home. I am willing to offer these to you.
But what does Miss Jiang want in return?
When your Royal Highness succeeds, I will let you know.
In my previous life, I was passionate about this field. However, for a woman, it was damaging to her reputation, so only my parents and Emily knew about it. The day I returned, I resumed this work. This time, I didn't care about my reputation. After leaving the Crown Prince's residence, I planned to take a carriage back, but I didn't expect Jacob Rivers to still be waiting at the door. We walked together for a while and suddenly encountered an old sage.
This is from an old acquaintance.
I was puzzled, but the old sage left without further explanation. When I got home, I opened the cloth bag and found only a piece of paper inside. The second prince and consort Sophia had a youthful romance. Who wrote this? How did they know about it, and why did they tell me? I felt uneasy, but since this person claimed to be an old acquaintance and provided such valuable information, they must be on my side. However, their unknown identity made it hard to trust them completely. Never mind, I should verify this information first. If it's true, it would be a significant leverage against the second prince. I provided this clue to the crown prince, and it turned out to be true. When the second prince was young, he studied in the south and happened to meet consort Sophia, who was recuperating there due to illness. They had agreed to get engaged once they arrived in the capital, but unexpectedly, consort Sophia caught the eye of His Majesty during a secret visit, and they had to part ways. The crown prince clearly understood the benefits of this matter, and within 7 days, rumors were flying everywhere. A month later, Empress Isabella suddenly invited me to the palace alone. The Empress was the birth mother of Princess Grace and the second prince, and the second wife of His Majesty. She was not familiar with Jacob Rivers, so I couldn't be sure what her invitation meant. But I heard that she had not only invited me but also the daughters of all the notable families in the capital. I had no idea what she was planning. When I entered the palace, I was thoroughly searched. I was suspicious but dared not act rashly. In the Empress's palace, a large group of noblewomen were waiting, whispering among themselves, unsure of the Empress's intentions.
Until bang! All the palace doors were shut, and no light could enter the hall.
What's going on? Where is the Empress?
Someone, let us out.
The hall was filled with noise and chaos. The Empress had trapped the noblewomen of the capital in the palace, clearly using them as leverage. This move was undoubtedly for the second prince, but what exactly did he intend to do? If this got out, the court officials would never let him off easily unless he didn't care anymore. An idea suddenly struck me: he wanted to forcefully seize the throne. How could this be? How could mere rumors push him to such an extreme? Seizing the throne and committing patricide would be considered a grave offense. If he failed, he wouldn't even be able to keep his life. I couldn't make a hasty judgment. My mind raced with countless thoughts. As I hesitated, a sharp pain struck the back of my head, and I lost consciousness, falling into darkness. When I woke up, I saw an unexpected person.
Grace, what are you doing here?
My expression turned cold. Grace had dared to escape from the marriage delegation, which meant the second prince was indeed planning a rebellion.
Ivy Jiang, what? Are you scared to see me?
I snorted coldly. If you're not afraid, why should I be?
A flash of anger crossed her face, but she quickly regained her composure.
Let me tell you, my brother is about to ascend to that position. Once he does, I won't have to go through with the marriage. I'll send you to the kingdom of Sienna to make you experience it all over again. Are you scared now? Take her away.
I was tightly bound and taken to a side hall, guarded by soldiers. I saw the candle flame on the candlestick and carefully burned the rope. The pain in my wrists was excruciating. Finally, the rope was burned through. I let out a long breath. Now, how to escape from here?
Miss Jiang!
I was startled to see someone emerge from the darkness.
I am an insider arranged by His Royal Highness the Crown Prince. I saw you being imprisoned here and came to rescue you.
I was skeptical, but at this moment, I had no choice but to follow her out. Along the way, I thought about many things. His Majesty was old and increasingly unwell. Most of the court affairs were handled by the Crown Prince and the second prince. Now, with the noblewomen trapped in the palace, the second prince was forcing His Majesty to draft an edict deposing the Crown Prince and appointing a new emperor, then coercing the court officials to agree. His grand plan would be complete. The second prince controlled the imperial guards, and the outside world probably didn't know what was happening. Even if the Crown Prince sensed something, he couldn't rashly deploy troops. So, I needed to leave the palace and give them a reason to mobilize.
Miss, don't worry. I know the palace routes well and will definitely get you out safely.
I hadn't even caught my breath when a stern voice came from behind.
Stop! Who's there?
We exchanged glances.
Run.
Following the young maid, I twisted and turned until we found a small hole in the wall.
Miss, you go first. I'll hold them off.
Before I could react, she pushed me through the hole. Instinctively, I started running, but something felt off. Everything was going too smoothly, as if it had been planned. Planned. I slowly stopped. Why didn't Princess Grace get rid of me immediately? She hated me so much, yet she only imprisoned me without any suffering. How did the maid get past the guards to lead me out? And why did the guards appear suddenly at the last moment? An incense stick's time later, I returned to the palace. To verify my suspicions, I decided to take a risk. Following the original route back, I headed to His Majesty's Hall of Mental Cultivation. Upon my return, the palace maids and eunuchs were all present, showing no signs of anything unusual. I knocked out a maid, changed into her clothes, and followed the other maids delivering meals into the Hall of Mental Cultivation. Strangely, the heavily guarded Hall of Mental Cultivation looked exactly the same inside. The eunuchs and maids were there, and the hall was filled with laughter. After placing the meal, I stood with my head lowered among the serving maids, observing this scene of familial harmony. The second prince and Empress Isabella accompanied the emperor during the meal, laughing and chatting warmly.
All right, I'm tired. You may all leave.
I followed the maids out but was suddenly called back.
Miss Jiang, please stay.
I stopped, raised my head, and turned to face the second prince. How did you recognize me, second prince?
The fiancé of General Rivers, the one who betrayed Grace and sided with my elder brother. Naturally, I had to investigate. But why have you returned, Miss Jiang?
As expected, they wanted to use me to frame the crown prince for unauthorized military action.
What is your intention, second prince? To lure the crown prince into deploying troops and then accuse him?
The second prince clapped and laughed loudly.
I didn't expect you to be so clever, Miss Jiang. Since you guessed it, why did you send out that letter? The letter didn't reveal any of my plans. Could it be that you want to help me?
Why don't you guess, before the crown prince attacks?
I gestured towards the palace gates, where smoke was already rising. The second prince looked at the smoke, his face full of confidence.
If Grace didn't insist on your death, I would have kept you around for fun.
Dream on. Instead of being so confident, you should go to the Xuanwu Gate and play your part.
The second prince didn't assign anyone to watch me, perhaps thinking I couldn't cause any trouble alone. This gave me an opportunity. The second prince stood confidently on the city wall, looking down at the crown prince and Jacob Rivers with a face full of shock and innocence.
Brother, what are you doing? Why are you attacking the palace with General Rivers? Aren't you afraid Father will find out?
Second brother, you have confined Father and imprisoned the noblewomen. What are you trying to achieve? Do you think Father and I are already gone?
Brother, you need evidence to back up your words. How can you say I have confined Father? Father is resting well in the Hall of Mental Cultivation. Enter the palace without your armor, and I'll prove it to you.
Bring Father out!
At this moment, I stood on the city gate and shouted with all my might.
The second prince has committed regicide, violating the natural order. Please, your royal highness, punish him.
What nonsense are you spouting?
The second prince was dumbfounded, not understanding what I was saying. A barely noticeable smile appeared on my lips.
I witnessed the second prince committing regicide with my own eyes. He poisoned His Majesty's food and imprisoned the noblewomen in the Empress's palace, intending to seize the throne.
You're lying! My father is alive and well! Someone, bring my father here!
The second prince ordered loudly, and the situation became tense. I stood before the army, feeling no fear, because I knew His Majesty was already gone. Gone because of the poison I administered. After sending out the message, I bought several herbs and made them into poison. Then, I infiltrated the palace as a maid and poisoned the food. Indeed, it was a trap set by the second prince, but it was also the perfect trap for him. For me, it was the best opportunity to bring him down quickly. Whether he intended to seize the throne or not, he had to act as if he did. He probably never imagined that a weak woman like me would have the heart to commit such an act. He didn't guard against the food I served. I hoped he would eat it too, but unfortunately, he avoided that dish. However, His Majesty ate it. The poison didn't take effect immediately, but by now, it should have. Sure enough, A quarter of an hour later, a trembling eunuch knelt on the ground.
His Majesty has passed away.
What? What did you say? Impossible! How could my father have passed away?
He turned to look at me, eyes filled with rage.
It's you. You caused this. I'll end you.
He raised his sword and charged at me.
Jacob Rivers, catch me!
I shouted and leaped from the city gate. The next moment, I fell into a warm embrace.
Lily Jiang, why do you always do such dangerous things?
I chuckled softly, holding on to him, ignoring the surprise in his eyes.
As my fiancé, isn't it your duty to protect me?
After all, he would be mine sooner or later. Why not use him a bit early? He placed me in a safe spot.
The second prince has committed regicide. Soldiers, follow me into the palace.
Kill, kill, kill.
After a brief rest, I entered the palace again. When I found Princess Grace, she was already tied up. The soldiers, unsure of her identity, had placed her to the side.
Madam.
The soldiers saw me and made way.
May I borrow this sword?
I smiled at a soldier and asked. He didn't understand but handed me the sword anyway. I took the sword, my smile fading, and walked straight to Grace.
Grace, do you regret it?
I placed the sword against her neck, my face cold.
Don't harm me! Don't harm me! I was wrong. I was really wrong.
Ha! I sneered.
In my past life, she had ruined me. In this life, I almost lost everything because of her. Whether she was truly remorseful or not, I wouldn't let her go.
Grace, you once disfigured me. Today, you will experience the same.
I drew the sword across her cheek, leaving a mark.
Bring some ointment. Don't let the princess's wound heal.
I watched coldly as Grace clutched her face, crying in disbelief.
My face! My face! Ivy Jiang, you wretch!
Grace glared at me with hatred, trying to lunge at me, but the soldiers held her back.
Take the princess to the kingdom of Sienna and ensure she is strictly guarded.
Grace was dragged away, screaming, and put into a carriage, leaving the palace. Our grudge ended there. After that day, the crown prince ascended the throne, and Jacob Rivers was in the limelight. Next was my marriage to him. Before the wedding, I received a letter. The person who delivered it was the old sage, and the writer was my sister, Emily Jiang.
Sister, by the time you read this letter, I should have passed away.
When I received news of your demise, I was devastated. Later, I met Master Ethan and sought a way to see you one last time. The Master said he had no temporary method to bring you back, but there was a way to resurrect you. This method required a close relative of the deceased to offer their body. Sister, although you are not my biological sister, you treated me like your own, teaching me to read and write, and standing up to our mother for me. My life has been like a floating weed, and if my body can bring you back, that would be my greatest value. I know you've faced many injustices in your life, and I couldn't help you much. I only hope that after your return, you can achieve your wishes. I unintentionally learned about the second prince and consort Sophia, and I hope this information can help you. If you have avenged yourself, Master Ethan will deliver this letter to you. Sister, from now on, live well, for me and for yourself.
So it was Emily's sacrifice that brought me back to life. When I first returned, I was solely focused on making them pay, never considering how I came back. I didn't know where Emily had gone, but I had pushed this matter aside. Emily, I'm sorry.
Tears welled up in my eyes. If it weren't for me, she wouldn't have. After a moment, I finally composed myself.
Emily, I will live well. I will live my best life, and make this life forever bright.
A month later, my wedding day arrived as scheduled, with a grand bridal procession. For many years to come, I remained as radiant as I was on that day, the most dazzling person in the capital.